Well, hello. Welcome to this episode of the FFF podcast. I'm Jim Hochberg here with Eva Andrade. We're going to talk about really important things today. So please hang in there. And the main thing is, you ever see that Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot? That movie was about the Revolutionary War. People died, big bullet holes, because muskets have big bullets. That's what we're talking about. Patriots. Stay tuned. Okay, then.
Can I shake your hand? Because you're a patriot.
I'm a patriot.
Yes, I'm a patriot too. And you know what? I love this country.
I do too.
And you know what? I know that our country's not perfect. And I know that there are ways that our country can improve. But I believe that I am part of one of the greatest countries on this earth.
So I have lived in other countries.
I have too.
And
we both lived in Germany, but not at the same time. Again, let's squell any rumors. Jim and I are just friends.
I lived in Germany twice, once as a kid and once as a law student. I traveled all around Europe. There is no other country better than this one, no matter what the pitfalls are. This is the best deal so far. They're quickly trying to wreck it. And that's what we want to talk about today, because the key to stopping the wrecking of this country is in our hands.
So what I want to do is there's this great book that you can get from Wall Builders. It's the Catechism on the Constitution. And this is actually a little bit of a revision from the 1828 original. And basically, don't let the word catechism scare you. This was a textbook back in the day.
Catechism is actually a great way to learn.
It is. It's a great way to learn. And this book is basically a textbook on asking about, what is a federal republic and all that stuff. So it's a series of Q&A. But I want to start with a quote that's in the conclusion. So it's a very short book. So make sure you go to Wall Builders and get your copy of this. And because, Jim, I think that it's a great way to look at this great place that you and I have a heart for. And I quote, "In the next place, remember that this precious Constitution, thus wise, thus just, is your birthright. It has been earned for you by your fathers who counseled much, labored long, and shed their dearest blood to win it for their children. To them, it was the fruit of toil and danger. To you, it is a gift. Do not slight it on that account, but prize it as you ought. It is yours. No human power can deprive you of it, only your own folly and wickedness. To undervalue is one of the surest ways to lose it. Take pains to know what the Constitution is. The more you study, the higher you will esteem it. The better you understand your own rights, the more likely you will be to preserve and guide them."
Amen, sister. And what we need to realize is the Constitution followed the Articles of Confederation, which bridged the gap between the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and the adoption of the Constitution in 1789. The Revolutionary War marked an amazing event in history. And that's what we really need to focus on to get this table set. The King of England, the King of Spain, the King of France, the King of Italy, all over Europe. And
don't forget the King of Portugal.
In Asia, they had monarchical kinds of government. Nobody had any rights. There was no right to conscience. You could not publicly speak ill of the people in charge. You didn't have the right. You had no rights. You didn't own property. The king owned all the property. You may get to use it, or he may grant to some of his noblemen and stuff like that. What happened in the United States of America with this Revolutionary War, when you read the Declaration of Independence, is pretty clear. We can no longer accept the King of England's exercise of jurisdiction over us, and we're going to war over it if you don't agree, King George. So there was a war, bullets were fired, cannon were fired, ships
People
were
lost
sunk,
land, they lost lives.
they lost bank accounts, everything. It was
Yes.
destruction
Yes.
for the purpose of creating a society governed by the individual right to conscience, that we pick our government leaders based on the kind of leaders we want. We have the right to assemble, to free speech, to freedom of the press, to petition our government for redress of grievances. We have the right not to be forced to quarter soldiers in our homes. We have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. We have the right to keep and bear arms. And we have the right not to testify against ourselves in court. None of this stuff existed under the kingship guy that was in charge and owned everything.
And I love that you're reminding people of that, as we begin this conversation, because people came to the United States in those early days because they wanted something better. They left their home, they left their families a lot of times to come here and forge a new life here because of these promises that they knew they could get by becoming a United States citizen. A lot of them were immigrants, and guess what? They came here and they became citizens. They did whatever back in those days you had to do to become a citizen. And then they loved it so much they fought and died for it in some cases. It's a good thing to remember. Then you have the Declaration of Independence, then you have the Constitution, and then you have the Bill of Rights, right?
Correct.
And the Bill of Rights,
the first 10 amendments
the first
to
10
the
amendments,
Constitution.
and that's because of everybody knows, anybody who remembers their history, right, is you have the Federalists and you have the Anti-Federalists, and they're all fighting about but in order to get the Constitution passed, they said, we'll talk about these other things that you want to add, which actually became the Bill of Rights. And I know that you want to focus really on the 10th Amendment, because the 10th Amendment, and again, I want people to know this is not our interpretation. This is what the 10th Amendment says. It says, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
So, the 10th Amendment is hardly ever cited by the United States Supreme Court. If you think about what the 10th Amendment says, and you go back to 1973 in the Roe and Doe cases where they said abortion was
Are you
a
bringing up abortion
right.
again?
But wait a minute. The question is, why did the Supreme Court create a fake link to the 14th Amendment to make abortion a constitutional right, when what they should have done is looked at the 10th Amendment and said, Constitution says nothing about abortion, therefore it is reserved to the states and the people. But they didn't.
Which is, the 10th Amendment it's very clear that that's what it says, right?
And it's never, ever, hardly ever cited by the court because it would strip the court of the power when they want to make rulings.
And in fact, if you go to congress.gov, this is the Library of Congress website, they actually state in here that it's not used as often as it probably should be.
It's never used.
And I think that if you're a public school teacher and you teach history or civics or whatever, they really should get more in detail about, especially the amendments, because a lot of people, I know that, what's his name with Fox News, Jesse, he goes around the world, Jesse Waters' world, right? He'll go and he'll ask college students questions about, the early founding father stuff, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
And these people are graduating from our institutions with a diploma and they don't have the answer. But
so who's our West Virginia friend that we did a show with? Dave
Fowler. That Tennessee.
So he wrote a whole book about the 10th Amendment because he really wants the country to go back to that foundational point.
If you want to get a copy of that book, send an email to me, eva@hawaiifamilyforum.org, and I'll connect you with him and you can get a copy of his book.
So what I wanted us to do is say, okay, so we had the Declaration of Independence. We told the King of England, we're not accepting your authority.
And we dumped a whole lot of tea.
He came over. We had a gun war for years, which the colonists won. And so the United States existed from 1776 when the signing of the Declaration happened. They had to fight to remove the jurisdiction of the king. And then they had the Articles of Confederation because they really didn't want a strong federal government. And the Articles of Confederation really didn't work because the states were not cooperating. They were, competing actually against each other for economic things and stuff like that. And so that's why the Constitutional Convention happened, because Articles of Confederation weren't working. And I'm going to read the preamble of the Constitution.
All right.
Because it will explain to you why they did the Constitution. It says, "We the people of the United States, in order to," this is why, "in order to form a more perfect union."
We the people.
Because the union under the Articles of Confederation was not working. So they wanted a more perfect union. They wanted to establish justice. They wanted to ensure domestic tranquility. They wanted to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare of the people, and secure the blessings of liberty to themselves and their posterity, us, and everybody in between. Because that was what they wanted to do, they do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America.
And Hawaii state legislators, this is the way you do a preamble.
Yeah.
That's the correct way to do a preamble.
So through history, we get 13 states. We add some more states. We add some more states. 1959, Alaska and Hawaii become the 49th and the 50th state.
Because you saved the best for last. All I'm saying.
Every single one of those states had to have a state constitution. Because until the 14th Amendment was ratified after the Civil War, the first 10 amendments were not enforceable against the state government. The 10 amendments only say Congress can't do these things. It was perfectly fine with the Founding Fathers that states were regulating themselves. So that's just an interesting little tidbit. But what happened in 1959 when Hawaii prepared and adopted its constitution? And this is why it's so important that when we vote our values so that people that represent us in the legislature, the governor, and the Senate, who give us our judges, they are picking people that have the right philosophy of government. They have the right worldview. And from my perspective, the government that we have today does not have a Christian worldview.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because I got a post recently, and I say post, you can look it up yourself if you want. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but basically calling us a loser because of our position on some of the issues at the Capitol. And you know what?
Well, we are losers at the legislature and in the courts because of the kind of people we elect.
Well, yes, but of course that's not how they intended that, right? But the point is this. You know what? When we tell people to vote their values, there are people that have a different set of values.
Correct.
And they're voting their values.
They are.
So,
they're winning the votes.
So we're not telling this group stop voting and then we're just going to vote. We are saying that if you are a citizen in this great country, in the United States of America, if you're a citizen of the state of Hawaii, you have a responsibility and you need to vote your values, whatever those values are. And you know what? Maybe, just maybe, one set of values keeps winning because the other set of values ain't voting.
Well, I think they're voting, but they're not voting their values. They're voting friendships.
In
they're
Hawaii,
voting
or not
relations.
voting at all, right? I mean, let's be
maybe
honest,
not voting,
right?
Because half of the people don't.
And maybe that's a value. Maybe their value is that they don't want to vote or they don't care.
But going back to 1959, Hawaii adopted the Constitution of the state of Hawaii. The very first article is Article 1. Because why would you start with Article 2 if it was the first one?
Right.
Article 1, Section 1 is the Bill of Rights, political power. You want me to tell you what it says?
Please do.
You've heard me say this before.
Ding, 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 ding,
All
ding, ding, ding.
political power of this state is inherent. That means it resides without another source.
And it can't be taken away.
It comes from.
It's
It
part
is
of.
inherent
Yes.
in
Yeah.
what? In what? All political power of this state is inherent in the people. You and me, we have all the political power.
You person driving right now that's listening to this show, or you person right now that's watching YouTube. Yeah, we're talking to you. We're talking to you sitting on the couch, you playing with the dog, you in the kitchen cooking, listening to this. We're talking to you. That's you.
And more importantly than that,
Than
the
them
people
cooking?
that we elect to serve us as representatives in government have no more individual power politically than each one of us, because all political power is inherent in the people. If we don't exercise our measure and we let them exercise more than their measure, then they're abusing the political power. And I think that's what we're living through. But it goes on. It says, all political power of this state is inherent in the people, and the responsibility for the exercise thereof rests with the people. All government is founded on this authority. All government is founded on the authority of the political power and the responsibility to exercise it being divided equally between each citizen in the state. And if you haven't been exercising your share, shame on you.
So who is Justice, you probably know this, Justice Joseph Story?
Well, he was a Supreme Court justice 100 and something years ago that was actually a really good justice because he wrote really well. Some of them didn't write that well.
Well, and this is what he says about that. He says, and I'm quoting him now, being an instrument of limited and enumerated powers, it follows irresistibly that what is not conferred is withheld and belongs to the state authorities. If invested by their constitution of government, respectively in them, and if not so invested, it is retained by the people.
You're talking about the 10th Amendment again.
Right, right.
I'm talking about the state constitution deposit of all political power individually in every citizen.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the 10th, but it ties into that. I mean, he has the same reason for it.
Correct.
So he's saying it's retained by the people as part of their residuary sovereignty.
Yeah.
And I love that because we live here. We're residents of this place, right? So we also have that same sovereignty. And I'm not talking about the Hawaiian sovereignty, right? I'm talking about us.
Personal, individual.
Yes.
And so the interesting thing is, if you've been following this show, if you've seen any of the presentations that Eva and I do in churches or other places around, you've heard me say in different ways how to tell whether or not you are assuming the responsibility for your share of all the political power. Sometimes I use trucks. Okay. Sometimes I use restaurants. Sometimes I use playing sports. I recently, a friend of yours from high school asked if you knew a constitutional attorney that could help their, I think she's a sophomore in high school daughter with getting some merit badge about the Constitution.
With American Heritage Girls, right.
And so I had this conversation. I think we talked almost for an hour, actually. And I felt kind of bad because I didn't know if they wanted to talk for 5 minutes, but we talked for an hour.
No.
But anyway, so when I was trying to explain this point to her, I said, what's your favorite thing to do? And she goes, well, I'm a basketball player. I love basketball. And I said, oh, here's another version. Assume that you saw somebody that was going to go play basketball. And they sat on the bench and they opened their bag and they took out their basketball and put it on the bench. They took out their basketball shoes, took out their socks, put their socks on, tied up their shoes, picked up the ball, started dribbling around, went on the court, started playing basketball. But you were like watching on your phone from afar. You weren't actually playing basketball. That's the same way to look at, are you exercising your political power? Because if you're letting other people do it and you're not doing it, you're not really playing basketball. You're not really exercising your political power.
Just so that everybody understands that you practice what you preach,
I do.
I have been at the Capitol with you, and they give you 2 minutes to testify if you're lucky. If you're lucky, sometimes it's only a minute, but I have seen Jim Hochberg in his 2 minutes remind our legislators of that very thing right there. So in the 2 minutes, he'll be like, "Okay, here's my position on the bill," or whatever. And then he'll go, "But may I remind you that our Constitution," and he goes off on this because
I don't think they have the authority, although they exercise the power. They don't have the authority to tell us we only get 2 minutes.
Well, and in all of the hearing notices that came from the Senate for this entire legislative session, it has not changed, even though you've brought it to many people who will listen. In fact, if you're a legislator and you're at the state capitol, I know already, you see Jim walking down the hall and you run away because you know he's going to bring this up, because it says on the hearing notice that they may not even let you testify.
Yeah.
And so as much as Jim will testify to the content of the bill, which he does and what you should do, he also makes it a point to say, you're wrong. And you passionately believe that they are not allowing the state to be run by the people.
Well, they aren't. And the clearest way to recognize that is the reason that we go to the legislature to talk about a bill is because the elected legislators have decided to introduce this bill, which will create a new law or amend an existing law that we have to live under. They want to do this, and they're required to give us advance notice so that we can come and tell them what we think. Okay? If they're going to create this question that we need to talk about, why can't they also be required to take as long as we want to take talking about it?
And I think that's why, and I did get some flack on this. I think that's why when I was testifying at that abortion hearing, instead of using my 2 minutes to go on the evil of abortions, which is what people wanted me to do, I just felt like that we've really lost something in this state. You know, I think that people truly believe, so I'm talking to people on our side, Jim, not people on the other side, on our side. I honestly think they think that in their 2 minutes, they're going to change people's minds. And that's not going to happen.
Well, they want to. That's why they're there.
Well, of course, but that's the reality is that's not what's going to happen. We've talked about this, that most of the time, the decision on whether the bill is going to move or not out of committee has already been made. And so maybe in their thinking, that's why they're saying, just give us the 2 minute version, because we have your, and they say this, we have your testimony. We've read it. I'm not going to get into their mind on whether they actually have or not, but they claim they've read it. So when you're getting up there to testify, really the point of that 2 minutes is to show face. Mm-hmm. They see that you're there, that you care enough about it, and to bring up the point, the big point. I'm opposed, I support, and here's why. But I think that people have lost in this state the ability, like, I really want to change your mind on this. You and I can have a discussion. I'm not talking about me threatening you. I'm talking about me having a conversation with you. Maybe at the end of the day, maybe I bring up some good points. You're like, great point, and you change your mind. I don't think that happens anymore. I think that people on both sides have their talking points. They draw the line in the sand, and now we've resorted to threatening people and to calling people names and all that. And I don't find that anywhere in the Bible. Tell me a Bible scripture right now where it says go in there and threaten people within an inch of their life. But that's not how Jesus did ministry, and I think Jesus should be our role model. I think that's who we should be modeling.
Okay.
And I bring that up. I know you're talking about power to the people. I mean, how does that tie in? It ties in because we built this country on biblical principles. Whether people argue that that's true or not, I see it all over the early documents, right? So I think that we're supposed to be going back to voting our values. If we can bring in those values into this country, into our legislature, I think that we can begin to make a difference.
And the way to do that is to replace the existing legislators
ding, 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 ding,
with
ding,
people
ding, ding,
that
ding.
share your worldview. So what's your favorite restaurant?
Oh, that's hard. It depends. It really depends. If I feel like I want Mexican food, then I'm probably going to go to Jose's.
Okay. So let's assume you go to Jose's.
Okay.
And you're waiting for the waiter to give you the glass of water and the menu so that you can order something. Mm-hmm. And a server brings food to the people next to you. Mm-hmm. You look at the plate to see what they got, right?
Right, because you're smelling it. And
okay, so you look at it and you see it and you're going, oh, I wonder what that is. Or maybe you recognize it because you had it yourself, and it gets put on their table, and do you get to eat it? Probably not.
No.
They
No.
get to eat it. They're exercising their eating power. You're not, because it's on their table. That's what happens when we don't exercise our political power. We're leaving the food on there. We're not ordering on our table.
And what's not going to happen is what did happen to me one time at the spaghetti factory. I shared this story with you. I was cutting the bread, and I just didn't do it right. But somehow, in the greatness of how I do things very dramatically, the bread and the knife flew in the air and did this spinning thing and landed right on the plate of the guy on the table across. And Jim, it was perfect. The bread with the knife facing to him without missing one beat. I said to him, bread? So that's not going to happen, obviously. But the point is that, I think that we need to be aware of what's on our plate.
We do. And there's a section 2 of Article 1 before we run out of time.
Yes. Okay.
This is why you exercising your political power is important. Section 2 says all persons, you, me, the people in the back, everybody, are free by nature and are equal in their inherent and inalienable rights that cannot be taken away from you. Among these rights, not limited to, the enjoyment of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the acquiring and possessing of property. These rights cannot endure. They cannot continue unless the people recognize their corresponding obligations and responsibilities. Please start recognizing your responsibilities and obligations to protect your freedoms, your inherent liberties, your political power. We're giving it away because we don't stop to think about it.
Yep. And I'll tell you what did Ronald Reagan say? We are only one generation away from extinction and losing our freedoms.
Correct.
And if we don't fight for the freedom that we've been granted by the Constitution, first of all, the freedom we've been granted by God.
That's right.
So it starts from there. And then the Constitution, which builds on that freedom, which
separates the government from being able to take it away.
Which means if you're watching this or listening to this and you don't agree with Jim and I's position, well, then go watch another channel, because we are here speaking for people that do agree with us, and we have that right to do so. You don't like it? Hey, this is our great country. You can go make a channel.
But I'm willing to discuss with you if we base our discussion on facts, because feelings or opinions aren't facts.
They're not. But in the meantime, make sure you like, subscribe, share, hit that notification button so you'll always know when we upload a new video. Send us an email at eva@hawaiifamilyforum.org. Let us know if there's a topic you'd like us to address. And in the meantime, we will see you next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.